in Las Vegas. We got Daniel Johnson on Prism. We got Holden Isaacs on Chain. We got that beautiful Dread Scythe. What a card to find in your national championship draft. The fist bump has been extended. Sam O'Byrne, Pankaj Bhajwani here to bring you this final round here. Thanks so much for joining us today. Let's get right into the action with the first Dread Scythe activation. This is going to require potentially a read over from Daniel Johnson. Let's see how that arcane damage works. One is going to just go ahead and poke on through, bringing him down to 19 from 20. Now this is just 3 damage. Let's see what he wants to do.
And we just spoke about how Prism does have an answer to the arcane damage in the form of spectral shields, but you do need soul for it. And this Prism right now turns out of the game, no soul, so that one arcane is coming through.
Gotta find soul and gotta find resource to do it. It's much less efficient, shall we say, than a simple pitch 1 to an arcane barrier. Not present in the set at all. Had to find some spell void, but if we look over at Daniel Johnson, we were talking about this watching the games. When you have those 3 different iron wrought pieces of equipment, all of a sudden a blue card in your hand can become 6 block. That's a 1 card 6. Fantastic against a lot of heroes in this field, but no spell void found. No Halo of Illumination to give a little bit of insurance. So that physical damage prevention, very helpful, but again, facing down a Dread Scythe, how are you going to navigate this game plan if you're Daniel Johnson here on Prism?
Exactly. We're going to need to see how much that physical block is actually going to come into play if the chain just plans to, kill the Prism with a bunch of arcane damage. We also saw in the previous match that they have a whole bunch of Arcanic Crackles in the deck. There's just yet more arcane damage, even the Dimensional Gateway and Dimensional Crossroads for yet even more arcane damage if they can fit that through. So the physical block on the Ironhide, we're going to see how useful that is, but I will say the Ironhide works very well with Prism's hero ability. You can pitch a full blue to make a shield, use your 1 floating, use one of your Ironhide pieces, and you still have 2 more remaining to repeat that process 2 more times. So Ironhide probably best at its home in Prism, but of course the other heroes, like you said, if they show up with 3 of them, can really be very, very effective.
Now a nice little play here. We've got a Seek Enlightenment that's going right onto the Overload there. So that's going to have +3 or +2, I think it's a yellow. So this is 5 with Dominate, but if it hits, it gets Go again. Here's the thing. Dominate in a format like this when you're playing Chain, it's tough to find that majestic defense reaction, the hooves of the... I think that's... you know what I'm talking about.
Guardian of the Shadow Realm.
Yes.
Guardian of the Shadow Realm. And also even more difficult to find the legendary Husk, too.
Absolutely. So that's just going to take a 1-card block, blocking for 3. The Go again going to resolve, but it looks like we're just going to end the turn there, going and arsenaling and grabbing 4 more cards. Is Daniel in the Prism? How is Chain going to respond?
And critically, we spoke about Prism needing Soul, and Seek Enlightenment does have the additional line of text saying that if it hits, it also goes to Soul. So we see the Overload in that Prism Soul. It's going to be very, very critical if they want to survive the Arcane Barrage onslaught. So they will need to give up 2 cards here to completely cover up the Dread Scythe, which will also consume the soul. So, there's a limit to how much you can do this, but at least you're not on that tight of a clock as the Levier was in the previous game.
Absolutely. Now, another thing about the Dread Scythe is it just enables you, as we see an Impenetrable Belief being blocked with just for 2 there, so 1 going to come through. It allows you to really sculpt your Chain deck around the arcane damage enablers, right? Cards like Rip Through Reality. If you've dealt arcane damage, all of a sudden Rip Through Reality gains Go again. These cards that when you've dealt arcane damage get the incremental effects. Sometimes you have to worry about the Arcanic Crackles and the Vexing Mouses, but when you have Dread Scythe in your weapon slot, you can really consistently find those effects. So we're going to have to see, as Holden Isaac pitched one of those on his last turn, is he going to build the deck around that? He's facing down a Zealous Belting, giving 2 cards to the block, blocking it out entirely before an Illuminate comes down afterwards.
And I really want to shout out Holden Isaac's pitch stacking the past 2 turns. So both the previous turns, they pitched a red and a blue. So you just know that they're setting up something big in the endgame when they actually want to finally start activating Chain's ability. Now, I did notice a red Minnowism and a red Arcanic Crackle all the way at the bottom down there. Yep. So we know when that comes back around, it's going to be Minnowism Crackle, so yet more Arcane with a Chain activation on top of it. You could even Dread Scythe for yet even more Arcane. So this endgame state is going to be very, very exciting. On the Chain side, we're going to see whether the Prism can pressure Chain enough so that they are not allowed to keep that endgame pitch stack that they have so carefully crafted.
Yeah, Rip Through Reality there as well, which is what made me think of it. Another one of those Go also again enabled by arcane damage cards. Now, interestingly, you have to think that Daniel Johnson facing down this chain, seeing no soul shackles being created, having to pivot the game plan a bit because fatigue is definitely less an option on the menu when the chain isn't doing it to themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is the exact game plan you want to do when you have Dread Scythe, right? Like, the moment you see Dread Scythe, like, if it's pack 1, pick 1, I believe this was a pack 2 Dread Scythe pickup. I don't completely remember when it was. But when you get that card, your whole game plan shifts. You're no longer chain that's going to shackle. Your chain is going to load up on 3 blocks and blues. And you just say, I'm going to block you out, and then just Dread Scythe, and you are just constantly ticking down to this arcane damage, unless you have something like a shield. And we just see that overload in Soul being used to make the Spectral Shield. Now Prism gets to do its own weapon attacking, a very efficient weapon in its own right, actually. Iris of Reality, when you do have the Spectral Shield, coming in for 4, which is the same value as a Dread Scythe. Now, of course, it doesn't have the unpreventable, arcane damage in a sense, but, 4 is still an awkward enough breakpoint where that 1 extra is almost always going to leak in the early game anyway.
Got to rally the rear guard coming in. This is going to buy another card out of the block of Holden here on chain. That Spectral Shield going to put in double duty, both as an attacking card on Daniel's turn here, but you have to imagine going to be soaking up some of that arcane damage like you've been talking about. The 1 card there going to take chain down to 15. Daniel Johnson sitting at the 17 points of life here. Final round, National Championship, day 1. This is draft. Seeds of Agony being pitched into the Dread Scythe, immediately taking that Spectral Shield as payment for the arcane barrier. But once again, there's the seeds going to the bottom. There's some more arcane damage. Holden really setting himself up nicely for the end of this game, holding a card in hand both of these last couple turns, content to just set up, give the Prism player kind of all gas, no brakes, whatever you want to do after you deal with this Dread Scythe. Let's see what you can hit me with. Here's another Seek Enlightenment.
So, perfect. Another Overload. So this is yet going to be another soul for the Prism, which, as we talked about, very, very critical. Now, I do want to point out Spectral Shield does not have a May clause on it, so when the arcane damage comes in, you do need to pop that Spectral Shield unless you're allowed to prevent arcane damage in any other way, which kind of works against the Prism here because, as we talked about, that's a very efficient weapon that they themselves have access to if they have the shield up, but because the chain's able to say, look, I'm going to just swing my weapon that eats up your shield, and sure, I don't get the damage through, but you don't have access to that efficient weapon anymore. So, I'm going to count that as a win. However, with this play here, there's 2 floating right here and right now, and we know that Overload's almost guaranteed to go to Soul. So, let's see whether the Prism actually elects to use it here. You might not want to, because then that shield just gets eaten up by the Dread Scythe immediately, and you don't get the Iris of Reality value that we're talking about. So, yeah, it looks like they're just passing. They're saying, you know what, 2 float. Oh, nope, they are using it. So, they are... and we're going to attack with it immediately. Yes, the Overload had go again, of course. So, because it hit, so the Overload did get go again. You get the value right now, and you get the value on the arcane damage prevention from the chain's follow-up.
Yeah, so, Prism able to continue to put a fair amount of pressure on. That's going to grab a Seeds of Agony block. I believe that only blocks 2, so 2 damage coming across. Chain going down to 11 here. Going to go ahead and ship the turn back. Just the 3 cards. 2 cards left in hand. See Dimensional Gateway being pitched into the Dread Scythe. We're just going to immediately say goodbye to the Spectral Shield. 3 more damage coming across. Now for Holden here on chain, you're clearly enacting a very specific game plan. 1 card has been held back this whole time. Is it a popper? We're not sure. There's been a card left in hand every single turn. If it is a popper or if it isn't, Holden slowly bleeding life. Daniel sitting at a pretty healthy 17 through all this arcane damage, given how much work those Spectral Shields are putting in.
Absolutely, and this is a very different play style we're seeing from Holden than earlier in the game. We really commended him on his pitching a red along with a blue to the Dread Scythe, which he was clearly setting up some sort of mean pitch deck with. But this time, what you pointed out, he's holding 1 card back, and clearly there's definitely a card. Unless that's a blue, he couldn't overpitch to send the Dread Scythe, but that's not a blue. He's holding it back for some nefarious purpose, you have to guess. And we're going to see what that purpose is.
Big ol' herald, I think, of rebirth heading to the graveyard there from the block. So you have to imagine that perhaps Daniel here on Prism is also aware that there could be a popper in hand, as we're just, once again, this is a no Phantasm attack, folks. This is an Illuminate off the back of a Warmonger's Recital. So if this hits, it's going to go to Soul. It's coming in for 6. There's no Phantasm to be seen here. This is just another 6 spot.
Yeah, it either goes to Soul or to the bottom of the deck, depending on what Daniel Johnson wants to choose.
Because of the Warmongers also as well.
Yeah,
so
it does have 2 on it.
Yeah. So Warmonger's going to also give the text if it hits, put on the bottom of the deck, but Illuminate says if it hits, goes soul, so you're saying they get to choose.
Yes.
That's nice of them.
You get to order the
That's
triggers.
nice of the
and you
rules.
get- yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, if it hits at all. It looks like Holden is blocking it out completely and saying, you know what, I'm not letting you choose. It goes to graveyard. That's why it belongs.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So we've got, that's going to end the turn. And once again, we're passing with 2 cards in hand. Is Holden Isaac. Now, I do have to point out that we saw the chain player here, Holden, go ahead and count the deck of Daniel on Prism. You have to wonder, we talk about fatigue with this kind of unpreventable, so to speak, arcane damage. We're talking about pitch stacking. There's a whole nother avenue towards victory that perhaps Holden is moving forward towards as he was checking the deck and checking how many cards are left. Maybe he's just trying to run Prism out of cards.
Absolutely, and Prism doesn't have a weapon. I mean, if they have the shield, they have the weapon, but we've seen Holden being able to deal with the shields very, very easily in a way that, doesn't allow the Prism player any agency. They can't. If Chain is sending like a forward tag, Prism can still block it 2 cards and keep the shield, but when Chain sends a Dread Side, now the shield is gone for sure.
So that was a Lunar Tide Plunderer being put in front of the Spears of Surreality. So that attack with Go again did have the Phantasm. So perhaps that was the popper that we've seen represented something represented with the card left in Holden's hand throughout this game. It did go ahead and get thrown in front as we see a Stubby Hammerers. It's not Hammer, it's Hammerers.
Yeah, I was confused about that for a very long time. Actually, I thought it was Hammers.
No, it's Stubby Hammerers. And Stubby Hammerers into Belittle with a Bounding Demigon reveal. Save for the Bounding Demigon, I feel like I'm watching a Fi match. Sorry.
So we have to wonder whether he had a blue Minoism. Looks like the red Minoism we saw him pitch earlier is the only thing he had. Now, critically, this does cause him to shuffle his deck. So this sort of, pitch tag that we thought he was crossing earlier.
Beautiful pitch deck.
The insidious, nefarious pitch tag that he had set up. All gone now, but for a very, very strong turn, what it looks like. The Stubby Hammer is going to be pumping up at minimum the Belittle and the Bounding Demigon, and we don't even know what's in the arsenal yet.
Yeah, now we do also have that Aether Iron Weave sitting in the equipment slot, a premium card that can give us the pitch necessary to perhaps go into Dread Scythe or whatever that arsenaled card is here on the turn, because we haven't activated Chain yet, but if we want to extend this turn even wider, maybe buy even more cards out of the Prism's hand, depending on the game plan we're watching Holden kind of exact here. It's going to be interesting to see which is the activation. It's just going to be the Minoism into another Minoism into the Bounding Demigon, so that's going to be a +4 on the turn. We get an additional +1 on the Bounding Demigon because we played a non-attack action this turn in the Minoism, so this is coming in for a total of 10
Sam,
with the Stubby Hammerers.
I'm getting deja vu. I feel like we saw this exact line the previous match.
My goodness.
This is Minoism into Demigon.
Wow.
And we do want to point out that Holden did not choose to activate Chain there, even though there was a line of activating Chain to get the Bounding Demigon go again, and as you point out, pop the Iron Weave to go ahead and swing Dread Side afterwards, but then you're banishing a card every turn for the rest of the game because of the Soul Shackle. So he's saying, you know what, my Dread Side is enough inevitability that I don't need to go down the route where you can even possibly fatigue me.
Absolutely. No, that's a very good point, and is, apparent in the way Holden is playing here. Just a very kind of disciplined motion through these cards as we see, once again, just a single blue card being put into 6 defense on this equipment, plus an additional 3. That's just going to get 1 point of damage over.
It's a Husk at home.
Woo!
Yes, also the Bounding Demigon, I believe, was being buffed by the Stubbies, and I think it only gets the non-attack buff if it's placed
from
from
the
Banish. Yes, so hence it was coming in for 10. Just 1 leaks through. Prism saying this is my Husk at home. Block 6 of 1 card. Absolutely amazing value.
Now look at this. We've got a Herald of Protection coming in that's going to immediately grab the Aether Iron Weave block, see if a couple more cards are donated to the cause to make sure we don't get any Spectral Shield creation or soul...
Yep.
Soulness.
This is a very, very effective block because, this 2-1 hits on the Herald of Protection. It goes to Soul, which means it threatens a Spectral Shield later down the road. It also creates a Spectral Shield itself when it hits. So, very, very value block on the Iron Weave there by Holden.
Dread Scythe, once again, we pitched a Gateway. The deck has been shuffled. It could be the one we saw pitched 3 or 4 turns ago. This is 1 arcane damage and 3 physical. There is a red Herald of Ravages being committed to the block. Looks like, yeah, no react. Oh, maybe taking
Okay,
that back. Oh,
right,
yeah,
right.
going to take that back and just take all of the damage there. Going down to 8, realizing, there's inevitability represented with not only the cards in deck, but also that arcane damage. I got to start mounting some offensive pressure myself, perhaps, thinking Daniel, because he's going to go ahead and keep all 5 cards after that Dread Scythe. Do we have any way to get go again? We do. It is a Zealous Belting from Arsenal. This is going to come in for 5 and critically have the go again.
Yeah, we spoke about this before the draft when you're doing the little preamble about Monarch draft, and I have to say, Zealous Belting in Prism feels a little bit like cheating because your Phantasm attacks, they have attacks at a higher rate, but they're balanced by the fact that they're Phantasm. So when you actually attack with it, you are getting the sort of the disincentive that it's a Phantasm attack. But when Zealous Belting doesn't care that you're attacking a Bridge Zone as Phantasm, and just saying, oh, it's higher than it's higher than 5, great, I'm gonna have go again, and that just feels like not fair.
And now, considering the lack of poppers and the lack of Phantasm that has been kind of represented by both players here, that trend is continuing with this Adrenaline Rush because Daniel is sitting at less life. It's going to get that +3 damage buff. The Adrenaline Rush coming in for 7.
And this explains why Daniel chose to, take back that block on the previous turn. Because had they blocked, it would have been an 11 on parity, and his Adrenaline Rush would not have gotten the buff. So he's
Absolutely.
saying, he realized in the last moment before fully committing to the block that he's like, oh, wait, no, I need to be lower than you. Kind of like the Scar for Scar dance you do. Back in the day, the Arcanite Skullcap dance you used to do.
Looks like potentially donating a Rip Through Reality to this attack for 7. Gonna take 4. Holden Isaacs on chain here, going down to 7. We've got 1 card left in hand. We've got 1 card in arsenal, but we also have a Dread Scythe.
Yeah.
Holden going to go ahead and count the deck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards left in deck for the Prism. Before the draw, looks like, or after the draw. So So 6 cards left in deck, 4 in hand, 1 in the arsenal.
So that's about 2 turns left. Two turns after this turn
After
cycle.
pitching, yeah.
Yeah, after pitching and after this one. So 3 turns total, including this one. Let's see what the Prism can get through at last 7 damage. Now Prism, unlike the chain, doesn't really have unavoidable damage. So,
but what she does have here is a Time Skippers, which we're activating with a blue. So now 2 more action points already on the turn, a total of 3 that we get to work through. I see at least a Wartune Herald in hand, and here is a Herald of Ravages coming across for 7. Going to immediately take some cards.
Ooh,
looks like just
popped.
Oh, there it is, the pound for a pound. That right, like you're absolutely right. That is a popper.
And Time Skipper is very, very good in this situation compared. Oh my God, the Blinding Beam. Just taking the words out of my mouth there, but just making a pound for a pound go down to 4 attack, not a popper anymore. So it is merely blocking 2, and the Herald of Ravages on hit will go through, which is Ghost of Soul and deals that 1 arcane damage.
Yeah, so this is a massive swing finding the Blinding Beam there. We already have more action points. Now the question is, I don't think we have the resources, unfortunately, to play out that Herald that we have still in hand if we're the Prism here, because we had to commit the 1 to the Blinding Beam, so we put our opponent to 1, which is huge.
It's massive,
Which is absolutely huge, but now what, if anything, is Chain able to send back? Because maybe, even if he didn't want to have all those cards in the fan, even if he was hoping to block and just prolong this game, we've now found ourselves with multiple cards. How much pressure can we put on the Prism player here? Can we commit? And it looks like the answer is just, once again, trusty Dread Scythe for 1 and 3.
And it's very important to point out that the popper that the chain put on the combat chain there, it didn't pop the Herald, but still got value in the sense that Prism kind of wasted the Time Skippers there. They didn't manage to use the extra action point, even though they obviously had 1 remaining.
Yeah, because you have the action point, so the popping there just represents lack of damage with that. It looked like a red Wartune Herald in the hand. That 1 resource could have been thrown onto the Wartune Herald.
Well, they were forced to use it for the Blinding Beam.
Yeah. So, that's the toss-up, right? It's like,
exactly,
do you want to throw another Wartune Herald, potentially maybe into another popper, but maybe you just take more cards out of the hand. It's you're trying to find damage here, right?
Yeah. This impenetrable belief out here, not getting the buff because this chain hasn't made a track for this entire game.
Yeah.
So it's blocking for 2, they're leaking 1, but chains at 1. This can be a little scary, but we are at second cycle. As we've been, we've seen the players counting each other's decks. We had second cycle, so let's see if the Prism still has any more red Heralds, which crucially come in at that breakpoint. But of course, Iris of Reality, that's a breakpoint.
Here's 4. This is a breakpoint. We've taken 2 cards. Do we have that Wartune Herald? Yeah, from last turn.
What color is that?
Oh, I can't tell.
It looks either blue or
Yeah.
it's definitely not the red.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not. Yeah, he just puts those 2 cards right on in front. We're going to drop the last cards in the deck here.
But very critically, Prism has a shield. So, and we know they're drawing a bunch of blues here. We're at second cycles. I mean, a whole bunch of blues. They can swing the shield, which is a breakpoint. And if they can just send one more thing that's at another breakpoint, you know, this could be Chain getting fatigued rather than the Prism.
Absolutely, because now if we're taking all the cards every turn, we all of a sudden we have a weapon.
Yeah,
all
we
of
have
a
a
sudden
weapon.
we have a Spectral Shield.
And the Chain doesn't have cards in hand to swing their own weapon.
This is going to be close.
Yeah. I definitely would not have expected it. I mean, Dread Scythe is just such a powerhouse of a card in this draft form, but we're seeing this Prism being masterfully piloted by Daniel Johnson here.
That Warmonger's Recital going to go ahead and buff up the next attack by 2 if it hits, goes to the bottom of the deck. You've heard of Diplomacy, but how about a song from the Warmongers? You know they can deal with heads of state, but did you know that they also make beautiful music on the top of a dais?
This is an Enigma Chimera, and if Holden does not have a... that's a
the
popper!
Consuming Aftermath, which is going to leave him with the card in hand. If it's a blue...
He can pop the shield, and then Prism no longer has a weapon.
Oh my goodness!
If that's a blue,
just a huge popper there for Holden Isaacs, finding the consuming the consuming. I think it's the aftermath. Yeah, consuming aftermath. It is the popper, just the shadow action. It is a blue. So we're gonna go ahead and immediately get rid of that Spectral Shield and 3 damage. But 3 damage is meh when you're looking at that. That was our weapon for the Prism player here. What a massive swing!
And tragically, Daniel Johnson had a blinding beam in the pitch zone when that popper was put on the combat chain, and that was a shadow card that was popped, so the blinding beam would have even been free to cast. So, oh man, that's Daniel Johnson not happy the chain found that popper at a very crucial point. Now let's see whether they can establish... Well, they need to establish Soul first before they can get another shield to have the weapon. Other than that, they're just bleeding cards from deck every time they send attacks. And then, you know, we talk about Warmonger's Recital and how it was a pretty powerful turn, but you have to, that is an extra card you're losing from your deck to pump up the attack.
Absolutely. Now, we have managed to keep a number of cards in our deck each turn for the Prism player here. We're just going to be able to send, though, this is a blue Enigma Chimera. You know, you have to imagine that Holden is going to commit 2 cards here, not you know, worried, not going to throw a popper down in case of something like a blinding beam. We're going to commit 2 cards to the block. Daniel going to have to Arsenal. The Prism player only has, it looks to be just about 3 cards left in deck. He's keeping the card in his hand, not going to throw in the Arsenal. It might be needed for pitch. The Chain player here looks like, he's only got 2 cards left to work with, but the thing is, one of those is a weapon. Or not one of the cards left in deck, but he himself has that weapon, the Dread Scythe, the Inevitability, the Reaper's Blade coming across. 1 arcane damage, 3 physical represented, but again, that's chump change at this point. We're worried about cards in deck.
Yeah, this is. I think I see a tremor of Irethel. I can never pronounce the card.
That is the government pronunciation.
Oh, that is the official one. Irethel.
Yeah.
All right, very nice. So there's the blinding beam we talked about that was pitched earlier, and I think Xena, Seek Enlightenment, and a Herald of Ravages. Is that what I'm looking at?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like the Prism has 2 attacks left. It's just the Herald and the Tremor, right?
Yeah.
So this is not looking amazing. Now, we don't know the block values left in this Chain deck. So, in this Chain deck. So, you know, I mean, the Chain, obviously being a Rune Blade, has a whole bunch of 2 blocks in there. So, you know, we're going to have to see. It's not over yet.
No, I mean, like you say, on that turn that we were able to go Spectral Shield into the Herald there if we were the Prism player, even though it wasn't the red, you still, any 2 block could have ended the game there, but Holden here on Chain, able to find those 2 critical 3 blocks to cover up that attack. This is going to come down absolutely to the wire.
And that popper on that turn, I mean, we just keep going back to it because that was also a buffed up Phantasm attack from the Warmonger's Recital. So that popper just getting all the tempo value in the world, which allowed Holden to break open the shield with the swing of the Dread Scythe. So.
We talk about, was the Prism player able to find a Dreamweavers? And the answer, it seems, was no. This is going to be just a big old Herald of Ravages.
Yep, it looks like a blue Seek and blue... 7. Thank you for representing.
7 damage. Here is a 3-card block.
There we go.
And final card in hand. Just going to go ahead and return to the hand.
And this is lethal. Now, Prism has to block this, and then they can't send an attack the rest of the game. It's just...
I mean, this is, we've got one of the cards in hand is a Blinding Beam. So that is going to bring it down by 2, make it 1. And that's the game, folks. That's the game.
Yeah. Daniel Johnson recognizing that, you know, they could block with both